Hello and welcome back to Highway to Hoover, a production of SEC Extra over at D1Baseball.com. I'm your host, Joe Healy, joined today by Anthony Dasher of UGAsports.com. We're going to talk some Georgia Bulldogs baseball coming off of an emphatic sweep opening weekend against UNC Asheville. More than that, though, we're going to talk about just kind of some big picture stuff about the early days of the Wes Johnson era in Athens. A lot of excitement about him being in town. And certainly, look, I mean, can't read too much into the opening weekend result against an opponent like UNC Asheville. No disrespect, of course, but there were some exciting things happening within that result. So we will get into that here in just a second. But first, I have to let you know that this episode of Highway to Hoover and every episode of Highway to Hoover is brought to you by PitchLogic, the system used by players, coaches, scouts, and instructors at all levels of play, from youth leagues to the big leagues. The easy-to-use and affordable technology makes the platform accessible to every player at every level. All the metrics and features used at the highest level. See pitchlogic.com for more information. Dash, first off, I appreciate you joining us. We were talking off air about how cold opening weekend was, so I hope you have sufficiently thawed out by now.
Yeah, it took a couple of days, but yeah, it was definitely a cold one. I know the players were coach was all bundled up there, especially on Sunday.
Yeah, I don't think anybody was spared. Every the games I were at was cold. Every game I watched on streaming, everybody was bundled up. The people in the crowd with blankets across them. It's just that's life, and when you're starting your sport in winter, basically. So
exactly.
I mentioned up top, the sweep of UNC Asheville, and again, we can't get too wrapped up in the individual result there, just given the opponent. The bigger tests are to come, but within those results, I'll leave it really broad for you. What stood out to you from the opening weekend success?
Well, that was my exact question to Coach Johnson after the game on Sunday. And the two things he mentioned was two things he wanted to see. One was competitiveness, and number two was consistency. Had nothing to do with the outcomes, nothing to do with the score. He just wanted to see his team play like it's supposed to play. Even again against an opponent like Asheville, Georgia was expected to go out and win pretty handily. And that's what they wound up doing. But he wanted to see his team, be consistent, like I said, be competitive. He wanted to see his team have fun. That's one thing that I've really noticed, since he's been here. Baseball, as is hard enough as it is. You don't need to put any extra pressure on you. So go out and have a good time, have some fun. And, Georgia certainly was able to do this. I mean, this was only the first time, one of 6 times in Georgia football. I'm sorry, bad football mind here, baseball history that you've seen the Bulldogs have scored 10 or more runs in opening 3 games, and all the time long as they've been playing baseball. So, that was pretty impressive. And we saw some players, have some pretty good debuts, for the team. So it was a lot to like. Again, throw away, the opponent. Can't take that into account. You can't. I mean, we're not going to know how good Georgia's going to be. I don't think the SEC play begins. I mean, there's no way with the schedule they've got you're going to be able, I don't think, to tell that. But they did some good things and some things Coach Johnson was looking for. They were able to check some boxes.
Yeah, it's a good point you make about the schedule. I mean, you get a little bit of a taste maybe in the Georgia Tech series, right? But Georgia Tech is not, right. They're a little bit down, and so you're not really sure exactly what you're going to get there. One thing I noticed about the weekend was that I think something like 15 different position players started.
15 different started, and 16 played, so they got some depth.
Yeah, how much? I mean, obviously, some of that is just because it's opening weekend and you're trying to get guys some run out there. But how much do you anticipate this being a lineup that has a lot of different iterations throughout the entirety of the season?
I think there's no question that's going to happen. I mean, Coach has actually, said that they've got enough depth right now where they're going to be able to, depending on if a right-hander or left-hander is on the mound. Like, for example, if a left-hander throws, they can run out of a lineup with 7 right-handed hitters, and right-handers on the mound, they can roll out 6 lefties. So they've got a lot of depth, a lot of good depth, a lot of good right-handed, left-handed combination they can throw out there, and I think that's what you're going to see Georgia do throughout the season. As you know, I mean, Coach Johnson is the most analytically keen coach I think I've ever been around in my entire life. And it's not just pitching; it's also the offense where Will Coggin has come in and really done a great job with some of these hitters. Back in the fall and preseason, they're going to lean on these analytics when it comes to hitting as much as they are, what they do on the mound.
One of the hitters that impressed most opening weekend, Slade Alford,
Yeah.
co-SEC Player of the Week honors from the league at SEC Extra. He was our SEC Player of the Week offensively, 3 home runs, hit 429 for the weekend, something along those lines. He's a guy who the talent's never been in doubt. At Mississippi State, we looked at him as, hey, this guy could be a future star. And to what extent does it look like, maybe from what you, even going back to the fall and preseason, to what extent does it look like maybe Alford is starting to tap into a little bit more?
Well, what we saw this weekend is pretty much what we've seen in fall and the preseason. I guess the biggest thing that surprised me, though, is Slade hitting the leadoff. I mean, everything we were kind of told it was going to be Dylan Carter, but Dylan Carter hit ninth, and Slade was hitting leadoff. And will that stay that the rest of the year? I mean, I've had people ask me that, since that game on Sunday, and as long as it's working, yeah, why not? I think you will see Slade continue to hit number one, followed by Charlie Condon number two, and Dylan Goldstein number three. Potentially, that could be a very good, top three of the order. But Slade is again, he's worked extensively with Coach Coggin. He's tried to shorten the swing just a little bit. He's not chasing as many bad pitches, so far as maybe he was at State at times last year. So they put in some hard work with it, and again, through 3 games against the opponent like Asheville is paying off. But we'll see what happens as they move down the road, because again, once conference play start seeing some of these SEC caliber pitchers, he's gonna have to make some more adjustments, I would think.
Charlie Condon, interestingly, played, and this is something you wrote about back in the fall, I recall. He played just about everywhere defensively in the fall. They were just kind of moving him around. And this weekend, he played some first, he played some left. Also, and those things aren't too crazy for him, but he also played some third base. I mean, What can you tell us about Charlie Condon, the third baseman? And then also more broadly, how he handled all the moving around of just seeing where else he could play.
Well, it's funny. He started at third base in Friday's opener, but did not get a chance. He did not get a single opportunity to make a play. So we're still kind of waiting to see on that. But we have, again, back in the scrimmages, we did get to see him play some third. It was very effective. But you even seen him play a little bit of shortstop, believe it or not. Now, he's not going to do that in the game, but Coach Johnson has been having him as well as a lot of these other guys play a lot of different positions. And Charlie, like you said, can play left, center, right. And I was talking to Coach Coggin. It was a week ago, talking about Charlie in left field. Of course, Coach Coggin, coached some pretty good players at Mississippi State. And he said at this stage in Charlie's career, and same stage he's playing his career, he's playing the left field at just as good as Will Renfro or Brent Rooker when they were at State at this same stage in their own career. So that's a pretty impressive statement to say how Charlie's doing right now. And we see Charlie make the great Sports Center play on Sunday where he goes tumbling over the wall in the wall there in the bullpen to make a catch. So Charlie, a lot more athletic, I think, than people want to give him credit for, and I think that's obviously going to help even more as he moves forward in pro ball.
Yeah, no doubt. The scouts love to see, can we stick you somewhere other than first base? Do you have a little more athleticism there? Yeah. You mentioned, just quickly, what was the exit velo you saw over the weekend from Charlie?
118.3 miles per hour, which was the hardest hit ball I've ever seen hit since they've been tracking all this stuff.
I mean, yeah, that's a big league exit velo. That's like an Aaron Judge, Giancarlo Stanton type of exit velo. This I don't know how, this might be a little bit of a hot take because Tommy White exists in the SEC, but there's a chance that Charlie, I mean, he might be just the best hitter in the SEC, full stop. The power is obviously there, but the way he hits home runs for me, and I'm not a scout, I'm not a coach, but I remember back in the fall in the Kennesaw scrimmage, which I know you weren't there for, Dash, but he hit a backspin line drive at like 111 miles an hour or something that hit the camera stand behind center field. It was one of those backspin line drives that it just kind of like took off like an airplane, and like, you don't see those types of batted balls tend to be like doubles, not home runs that carry out of the ballpark. So again, maybe a little bit of a hot take. And I get that because Georgia wasn't a postseason team last year and they're not expected to necessarily be this year, that he kind of falls under the radar. But man, I just have a hard time imagining maybe outside of Tommy White, there's just a better hitter in the pure hitter in the SEC than him.
Yeah, I think you might be right. And obviously I saw LSU, play last year, and Tommy White is one of the premier players, hits the ball as hard as anybody in the entire country. But Charlie is right there. I don't think what kind of Charlie kind of fools people sometimes. He's so tall. He's so, lean. And I just people don't think he's necessarily swinging hard, but again, 118.3 mile per hour velo. He had another one on Sunday that went right back at the pitcher at 115.2. It hit off the pitcher's backside. And I'm surprised the pitcher is still with us today, to be honest with him. Hit him anywhere else within a broken bone. Seriously. It was
yeah.
that.
I mean,
you could hear the kind of the like a hush kind of went over the crowd when the ball was first hit. When they first finally saw the pitcher was okay. He actually able to try to make a play anyway. When the throw was wide and, Charlie was safe. But to have one come back at you on the mound 115 miles per hour, it's just, I don't see how you can avoid something like that.
Yeah, you got no chance at 115, Yeah, I kind of smiled and laughed, but honestly, yeah, you're right. I mean, that could have ended horribly. So good thing it hit it, it hit him in a squishy part of his body, I guess.
Yeah, exactly.
Although sitting was probably not comfortable for a few days.
Exactly.
Let's flip to the mound. First off, I wanted to ask, there was a little bit of a surprise for me anyway, in the rotation when we saw Christian Mracna's name in the rotation. He's a guy who was more of a bullpen guy at George Mason. How much was he someone you heard as a potential weekend guy? Because there were a lot of guys in the mix, but he was not necessarily a name that I had at the front of mind of somebody I expected to see.
It wasn't until probably 3 weeks ago that I realized he was going to have a chance. Now, he didn't get to Georgia now until January because of enrollment and all that kind of thing. But it hasn't taken him long at all to really ingratiate himself with Coach Johnson, who just absolutely loves what he brings to the mound. He's a guy. He's 6'5", 220 pounds. He's he didn't do this the other day, but he has in the scrimmage topped off at 95. He's got a very good curveball, change up. His slider has been very effective, and right now they're just trying to again just kind of help bring him along. He's only started one game before this in his entire college career. I think he had 4 saves last year for George Mason. It's been strictly a reliever, closer type. But Wes Johnson sees something in him that he thinks he can be a quality closer, in the SEC, and that's what they're trying to do with him right now. And I thought he might be bumped back to Sunday, but Leighton Finley, who I know you saw against Kennesaw, got the call, and that game looked very well. But Chris Mracna, though, the name's kind of popped on the scene a little bit late, but again, pitched very well. Only gave up 1 run. Had 3 walks, which is a little bit of a concern. But they love his stuff. They love his makeup, and we'll see how he does moving forward.
The mound Georgia's pitching staff is kind of interesting to me, and Mark and I talked about this on our podcast previewing the Dogs, and that because there's so much turnover in the lineup, right? I mean, there's a lot of familiar names gone out of the lineup around Charlie and Corey Collins and what have you, but. So I kind of just in my mind kind of expected the same on the mound, but then you look at it and it's, we know what to expect from Charlie Goldstein. We know, Leighton Finley, obviously I saw him on the Cape and was excellent, and saw him in the fall and he was great. Colton Smith pitched some big games. Obviously Chandler Marsh has a great arm. And then you mix in the transfers. We saw what Jarvis Evans could do late last year. I think I kind of was perhaps underrating just the talent on this staff, and then you mix in the Wes Johnson piece of it, where he tends to get the best out of his pitchers. I mean, last year wasn't perfect on the mound for LSU, and he managed to kind of cobble it together and win a national title. So I don't know if you were kind of like me and went into it kind of maybe with lower expectations, then looked at the roster and was like, actually, I could see this being a pretty solid unit when it's all said and done.
People ask me all the time, how do I think Georgia is going to do this spring? And I always go back to the pitching. It's going to depend on the pitching. I think the bats are there, but the pitching is going to be the question. But, Georgia may not have what you call a true star, number one guy type pitcher, but they've got some good arms. And I think they've got better depth than they did last year on the mound from, top to bottom, starters and bullpen. And like you said, you add in the Wes Johnson factor, and make no mistake, that has been a big deal for a number of these kids. You mentioned Chandler Marsh a little bit ago. He has changed his delivery a little bit at the behest of Coach. More of a 3/4 deal right now. He's just pitching with a lot more confidence. And I credit that to Wes. You talk to all these guys, and even though he's only been here 7, 8 months now, they swear by what he's trying to teach. Now, it may not. It's kind of funny. You talk to Leighton. Even Leighton kind of laughs. I still don't know everything he's trying to tell me, but I can understand, what he is trying to get across. I'm able to apply that to what I'm trying to do on the mound. So you're seeing some some good leaps by some of these pitchers, and we didn't even see all the pitchers they have at their disposal this weekend. I mean, we're going to see, we did see Jarvis for an inning over the weekend. He's going to start to get the game today against Georgia State. But but Brian Zeldin, guys like that, Brant Panther, who pitched an inning. A couple of newcomers they brought in, but a lot of these other names that are back that pitched last year we haven't seen yet. So I think it's got to potentially be a deep group. May not blow your doors off, so to speak, but I think it's a good solid group of a lot of depth, and that's ultimately what you need to kind of navigate through an SEC season.
No doubt, yeah. I'll end on this. Do you have a feel for, because, if you ask Wes Johnson or any of the coaches, like what constitutes success this year, you'll probably just hear a lot about the process, and that's fine. Like, I get why they have to look at it that way, but just if I'm asking Anthony Dasher what he thinks constitutes success for this Georgia season, do you have a feel? Because I personally, I don't. Like, I'll go first. Like, I don't.
Yeah.
I'm having a hard time wrapping my arms around what would constitute success from a results perspective for this team, because I actually like the talent okay, but it's just hard to fathom a team that has had this many new guys and that much turnover, and last year the record was what it was. I'm having a hard time getting there, but I do like some of the talent.
That's my thing. They've got 27 new players this year, 17 transfers, 10 true freshmen. I can't, as long as I've been covering Georgia, I've never seen a Bulldog team with this many new faces, and I'm still having to learn them, right now. But you look, you say that, but then you look at some of these guys they brought in, and you mentioned Slade Alford, who's knows what it's like to play in the SEC. Logan Jordan, who was at Campbell, a perennial, NCAA team. They've had success. They played against, Tennessee. They played some of these other schools, and they've had success. Dylan Goldstein, FAU, another team. We saw FAU last time Georgia hosted the regional. FAU was here. FAU took one from Vanderbilt this past weekend. He's had success against teams of this caliber, SEC caliber. So, you asked what would constitute success. This team, I think, truly thinks it can be a regional team, as silly as that may sound. Coach Johnson himself has laid absolutely no limits on what this team can do. There's a clip, I don't know if you've seen it or not, where he's talking to him in the clubhouse. And he said that never sell yourself short. If you think you can be this team can be a CWS team. Now, I don't think that's going to happen, but that's kind of he's not putting any kind of limits at all on what this team can do. And if the pitching can be as consistent, I think it can, then Georgia, I think, will have I don't think they're going to finish 500 in conference play, but they can get close, and maybe they can sneak in. I think, again, I think you're seeing this team play a lot looser already than what we saw last year. Is not they're enjoying themselves, they're having fun, and I think that can play a big role. But again, we'll see. So many new questions, so many new faces, but I think it's going to be a fun team to watch this spring. I really do.
Yeah, I generally agree. I'm kind of excited to see him with my own eyes at some point. I'm with you, just so I don't leave you out there hanging with your own answer. I'll answer too. I think if they go into Hoover with a chance to play their way into the field, I think that should be seen as a success. And even last year, they really weren't that far off, right? They came off that Tennessee series win thinking, hey, if we take care of business against Missouri, then we're right there. And of course that didn't happen, but right. The one thing that couldn't happen happened. Exactly. But so they really weren't that far off last year. So this team picks up a couple wins that last year's team didn't. I think they're right there. You go into Hoover with the chance to play your way on, and that's really all you're looking for with the postseason there is to be able to play your way on. And so to me, that's there. And look, if they go 12-18, but some of these young players really, show a lot of potential, then I think you'll take that too.
Sure.
But yeah, the idea that they could play meaningful games as they head into Hoover, I think is at a bare minimum kind of what I would call a successful season there. And I think that's certainly within the realm of possibility.
That's kind of where I'm at too.
Yeah. Anthony Dasher, thank you again for joining us here on Highway to Hoover. Real quick, go ahead and plug where readers can read your stuff, find you on social media, all that good stuff.
Sure. You can find me on UGAsports.com and on Twitter at Anthony Dasher1. And I can promise you I cover Georgia baseball more than anybody else in this network.
That is, that is I should have said that in the intro, like truly dedicated to covering Georgia baseball. Sometimes I'm surprised in a market where football comes first, second, third, fourth, fifth, and sixth. And also with a basketball team that's a little bit better than it has been in a while, I sometimes am surprised to see Dash out at games and scrimmages and stuff like that. So I can say from my own personal experience, nobody's covering Georgia baseball like Anthony Dasher. So make sure you're reading his stuff, following him on social media. And that is going to do it for this edition of Highway to Hoover, a production of SEC Extra over at D1Baseball.com. Thank you to Pitch Logic for sponsoring this and every episode of Highway to Hoover. Thank you to Anthony Dasher again for joining me. And thank you, the listener, for listening